gotta dream it, like you mean it. Embrace the vision, no need to conceal it. Feeling masterpiece, the colors so bright. Aim for the stars, reach new heights. Align your life, don't let it design you. Chase your dreams, make them all come true. Dance to the rhythm, move with the beat. You're the creator, get up on your feet. Then you gotta dream it, like you mean it. Embrace the vision, no need to conceal it. Vision masterpiece, the colors so bright. Aim for the stars, reach new heights. Design your life, don't let it design you. Chase your dreams, make them all come true. Dance to the rhythm, move with the beat. You're the creator, get up on your feet.
Peace, peace, peace. What's up? What's good? What's happening? This is Coach Bay, and welcome back to another episode of Design Your Life podcast, where we bring you and highlight extraordinary people who have actually crafted their own life that they enjoy, that they love, based around their dreams, their passions, and their desires. And today we have a wonderful guest. A friend has come to visit with us today. And before we even get into it, I just want to make sure you understand what this podcast is all about. This podcast brings people to light that have crafted a beautiful life. And it's an opportunity for you to learn how, see how it's done, make it real, which is the biggest thing for many of us, is that it just is not real. And you can believe in the possibilities of what you can actually do. And when we bring you these individuals, it's individuals that have given themselves what I consider the greatest gift that you could ever give yourself, which is a design life around your passions and your desires. So we're going to have a wonderful conversation here. I'm looking forward to it. And today we have an exciting guest. She is a wife. She is a mom. She has degrees from Cal State University, Bakersfield, the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, Alberto Mutesi School of Evangelist. She's a licensed clinical psychologist, a dynamic motivational speaker. I consider her a shero, and has a heart for service. Dr. Anna Mena Saidi.
Hey, good morning. Thank you so much for having me, Coach.
Yeah, no, absolutely. Thank you for stopping in and hanging out with us for a little bit.
Absolutely.
We're going to jump right into it. So,
okay, let's do it.
What I want to know is where you're from. Like, take us back to childhood. So, what did it look like, smell like, feel like when you grew up?
I love that question, by the way. So originally, I actually was born in Guadalajara, Jalisco, Mexico. And I was brought here to the United States when I was about 4 years old.
Okay.
And so I actually, when we first immigrated to the United States, we were brought over by my grandmother, who at the time was working here, 6 months out of the year. Mm. And so we actually landed, I guess, if I wanted to say that, in Salinas, California, which is up north from where we are currently.
Okay.
And I lived there for a couple of years, and then my mom met my sister's father, and he moved or relocated the family here to Bakersfield, California.
Okay.
And so I don't really remember any other home other than Bakersfield.
Okay.
This is where, I, at the time, basically started like first grade, and I, did my entire education here. I went to Beardsley Elementary.
All right.
I went to Beardsley Junior High, then went to Tevis Junior High for a little bit, and then went to Stockdale, go Mustangs. And then went to Cal State and got my bachelor's degree in psychology, because I was 15 when I realized I wanted to be a psychologist and help people. Okay. And then I realized that I wanted a higher degree because I wanted to do more.
Okay. All right, now before we go there, because I want to back up just a little bit.
Yeah.
So parents, what did they do when you were growing up?
So I come from a single home, single parent home. My mother is another she-hero, as you mentioned. But also my grandmother played a big role in raising us. So my sister's father was with us for a couple of years, and then they separated, and he decided to go back to Mexico, and my mom was left with two small children at that time to basically fend for herself. So I come from a line of very strong women, and seeing firsthand what it's like to design your own life in that way and want bigger and better things for yourself.
No, that's a beautiful thing.
Yeah.
So when you were a kid, what did you like to do? Did you have dreams? Like, what did you like to do? What did you dream about when you were a kid?
I think in general, now in hindsight, as I look back, there's a lot of obviously there was a lot of trauma from, immigrating from one country to another at the age of 4. And then the acculturation process. My first language was Spanish, was not actually English. So learning, I remember my mom would say, the couple months after we got here, I would take you to the park and you would play around with other kids and everybody was speaking English and you didn't know what they were saying. So you started to pretend to speak English, and it was really just jibber jabber. But I think that speaks to the kind of person that I am, that I don't let the environment determine what's going to be my outcome. And so I was a happy-go-lucky kid for the most part. I've always been very positive, even though, again, I've lived through a lot of pretty significant events, traumatic events in my life. But I've always had a sense of resiliency that I didn't know I had until obviously now as a grown-up. But I was pretty much a happy-go-lucky kid. Yeah. I was very positive, and I was always very social. I'm the kid that goes out and plays with everyone no matter what's going on. And then I think once I found Christ and found God as a newborn Christian, I think it all made sense. It played out. I was like, oh, so that's what was happening. That's what you were doing in my life at that time. Right. But I loved to read as a kid. I loved arts and crafts. I loved to be outside.
Sounds like my daughter. She's 5 now. She loves to read. She loves arts and crafts. We speak 2 languages in the house.
Awesome.
But she went to an immersion Spanish daycare.
Nice.
And it's just interesting watching her maturation and just grasping the Spanish language, and just watching her transition. So it's interesting. It's funny. So so you started speaking. Well, you came here at 4, and when did the English when did you feel comfortable? I don't even know if you can recall.
Yeah, it would be one of those things where
5 or 6 maybe.
Probably, I remember. I think my first really kind of concept of understanding, like, oh, I can actually speak English and I'm pretty good at it too. Was, I think I was like in 2nd grade, 2nd or 3rd grade, and I remember the ESL staff, teachers, people they basically came in and said, you don't really need this assistance anymore because you're pretty much where you need to be. If anything, you're actually excelling for English speakers, right? And so I thought, oh, okay, so I'm good. I know, I can speak this language. And after that, I don't remember ever having any assistance when it comes to learning English. So probably around 2nd grade, I would say, give or take. I don't know. I guess we'd have to ask my mom to confirm.
So family still in Mexico?
A lot of my family, most of my mother's family, and my father's family is all still in Mexico. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Awesome. So I know there were obviously challenges, and you being so young,
right?
You probably really didn't experience a lot of that. But I know you said that there was trauma and things like that. Yeah. So I'm just wondering, as you kind of progressed and moved into high school, right? First of all, who were you in high school? Were you like, the quiet girl, or were you just like the one that was everywhere, everyone knew? Like, who were you in high school?
I don't think, it's interesting now because every time, I think the older I get, that question seems to some degree change, but I think at a core, at the essence, so I was a band nerd. I was in band. I was in marching band. I loved, again, because I loved music and arts and crafts. I played the clarinet from the 4th grade basically until my senior year in high school. So I was that kid, right? But then at the same time, I wasn't your popular type of girl, but I was the kind of girl that spoke to everyone and got along with everyone. So I had friends on the football team. I had friends on the soccer team. I had friends on the cheerleading squad. I had friends in band. I had friends, who were book nerds or bookworms. Like, I just felt that I could speak to anyone. Yeah. Because I think really realizing early on that people looked at me differently because of the color of my skin or my hair texture was different. I didn't want to make anyone feel that way growing up. So in high school, it was very intentional. So I was friends with almost everyone, really. Yeah. Even my teachers, I got along with, and they all remembered Anna Banana, right? Anna Banana. I was in English class, or I'd be in science or chemistry or Spanish, and everybody's, my teachers, would remember Anna Banana, right? And just kind of stuck with me. But that was kind of the kid I was,
Okay.
all while trying to explore the different identities. So there was a part of me that wanted to kind of navigate at one point towards, at that time it was like Gothics, right? The Goths, everyone who wore black and that kind of thing. And then after that, it was like, oh, I want to be into like girly things, right? And so I wanted to, be very girly. And then at one point it was like, no, I want to hang out with the guys. So it's all about the sports and this, that, and the other. And so I think one of the blessings in disguise, I think that my mom allowed me to do is to explore that. Awesome. To explore those identities in a safe way and not, unlike my grandmother, for example, who always had something to say about each one of those stages. She was just like, as long as you are doing good in school and you're being responsible and your grades are not failing, explore and do whatever it is that you need to do. Because I think she realized that underneath it all, I would eventually find my way. And right around senior year, I did. I kind of just stuck to who I felt I was. That's also, again, around the time that, Christ became a very big deal in my life. And so that was also very useful.
No, that's awesome. And we'll talk a little bit more because I personally believe that a lot of times as young people, we miss out on the benefits of self-exploration.
Absolutely.
And just like explore. So we'll talk about that a little bit more. But so coming out of high school, you're starting to figure it out, and kind of like fall into who Anna Banana is.
Yes.
Right?
Yes.
Who Anna Banana is. So what's the next move after high school? Are you going to Montessori?
So in the background of all of this, while I'm in high school, I'm also obviously going to my local church. And my mom and I come across this school of evangelists.
Okay.
And she wanted to explore the possibility of getting an education or degree in theology to some degree. And I thought it was interesting because, again, being someone who's I'm always wanting to learn something new. I'm that person that's asking questions. I'm curious. I'm not afraid of asking. And so I was curious at the time, and I thought, well, that's kind of cool. I'd like to have some sort of degree, or I think I was just searching more for the idea of how can I get to know God more and know about him in different ways.
Right.
And it just kind of worked out because the School of Evangelism was actually in Santa Ana, California. Okay. And so at that time, this was obviously before Zoom and, virtual school. And so we actually would drive once a week. Me and her would drive all the way to Santa Ana to go to these classes, night classes, basically. And then we would drive back home. Okay. And so we did that every week, sometimes 2 times a week, until we basically got our associates in theology from the School of Evangelists. And so that was kind of going on at the same time that I was enrolling and going to, first it was Bakersfield College, and then I transferred over to California State University of Bakersfield. So it was kind of all in tandem going on at the same time.
Awesome. Yeah. How you feel like that shaped who you are? Because I know coming out of high school, you were starting to figure it out. Yeah. But that feels like to me like it was a significant impact. That time made a significant impact on you. So how do you believe that shaped who you are today?
I think it shaped a big part of who I am and the foundation that I always have and I go back to regarding my faith. It was really interesting for me to learn about the Old Testament, to learn about, different aspects of the Bible and how to see Christ and see God in a different light as I'm forming my own identity. So it was I think it was foundational, really, because it allowed me to also move forward in my secular education in a way that also was, I was able to, and I felt good enough to question either of those, whether it was learning from God or whether it was learning about Sigmund Freud, right? Right. I felt that I had enough foundation to question both of those fields. Yeah. And I think eventually, again, it shaped me because it allowed for me to see myself as I do now in terms of always wanting to integrate my faith with my profession.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. So fast forward a little bit, psychology.
Yeah.
Why, so we're a little girl and you're playing and you're curious and you're asking all these questions and, you're figuring out English, but why psychology?
So it's an interesting story. I actually had a cousin who, at that time, when I was around 15, 16, I had a cousin who lived in Texas with her husband, and she had, I guess, and maybe I should confirm with her, I guess, but at that time she was taking courses, university courses, and she had psychology books in her home. So when we go to visit her one summer, right, I'm sitting in her house and I'm looking, because again, this is me being curious, maybe even nosy. And so I'm looking through.
Nosy is good.
So I'm looking through her books and I'm like reading, and I'm looking about, psicología forense, forensic psychology, because her books are in Spanish, because she's, her school's in Mexico and whatnot. So, and I'm thinking, what is that? Like, that's interesting. I'd always liked law to some degree too. I had friends on the debate team and the forensics team in high school, and it was just always interesting. I also had a group of friends who were in what at the time was medical academy. So that high school had this kind of platform where you could kind of get like a tech degree when you graduated. So you were ready to go off to either law school or med school, depending on what you want, which one of those.
And you have friends that went to those schools?
I had friends that were in those programs within my high school. So it was always interesting to kind of hear, the medical terminology they're studying, or to hear about the debate and the different laws and how they were going to, and they would put on, specifically the debate team, they would put on these like court trial kind of mock trials. And I would go to them because I'd be a good friend, right? I want to go support. And so I'm learning about this, and it's kind of like, again, I feel like in hindsight, I'm like, God knew where he was placing me and where he was taking me. And so when I come across forensic psychology, I was like, this is perfect. Like, it's mental health, it's, helping people, but it's also with an emphasis in law, or the law, right? The integration of both of those. And I think that was the seed that was planted during that trip. And then I came back, and when I started, so I knew I wanted to do something in psychology at that point. So Bakersfield College, my AA was in psychology, or my prerequisites were all towards my bachelor's in psychology.
Got it.
And so that's kind of where that started. And the more I looked into it, the more I did, some research, I thought, this is something that I really want to do. Right. I've always known I wanted to help people. I just didn't realize, or didn't know how I was going to do it.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So, all right. So Dr. Anna Mena Saidi. So for many people, when they hear, it's funny because my daughter was asking me about, well, why do you have all these lights? What is all this stuff set up for? Like, I'm going to have a conversation with someone today. She's a doctor. She's like, a doctor. And so she goes right to the medical field. Exactly. Right? Which most people do. Yeah. So for those who don't understand, what is a Saidi?
So it's basically a doctorate in psychology. And so you have extended training and education after you graduate with your bachelor's degree that is specific to the field of psychology.
Got it. Yeah. Got it. Okay. So, all right. So now you've completed your degree. What's like the first move after you complete your degree? What are you doing?
So after I'm completing my degree, at that point I was hired on by the same agency where I was completing my internship. So that last year of your doctorate program, you're doing an internship somewhere. And that agency, Child and Family Center in Santa Clarita, California, because at the time I lived in Los Angeles. So the interesting thing about my educational path is that I actually don't have a master's. So I opted out to not have a master's degree because, again, being that I was curious and I'm asking questions, I remember asking my counselor at CSUB, well, do I have to get a master's or can I just go straight into a doctorate degree, right? And because I asked that question, that's when I was told, well, technically no, but you don't want to do that because it's really hard to get into doc programs with just a bachelor.
Got it.
And for me, it was like, oh, well, don't tell me twice. It's hard. I'm going to try it, right? That's the kind of person I am. And it's funny because now my daughter's the same way. And I'm like, oh.
Yeah.
And so I actually applied to the Chicago School of Psychology with just a bachelor's. And it was definitely, harder to get in because there was a lot of other, requirements that I needed to fulfill in order to... I think they wanted to just know that I was a serious student and that I wasn't just, a 22-year-old that was going to not finish this program. No, for sure. Listen, and this speaks to the belief and the possibilities. We talked about it a little bit earlier. Yeah. It is so important. And a lot of times, number one,
what stands out to me right now is just curiosity,
Yeah.
asking questions,
Yeah.
not being afraid to get the answer, maybe that you don't want.
Absolutely.
And just being resilient and not allowing people to determine your destiny and
Absolutely.
you determining it for yourself.
Absolutely.
And that really stands out because a lot of times, and I want you to kind of, for those who are watching, because I would say it's a non-traditional path.
Yeah.
To
Absolutely.
just kind of like, for those who maybe, okay, well, this side thing sounds pretty cool. Like, can you kind of break down, just kind of take us through the timeline of what your, from high school, what that educational path looked like for you specifically?
Yeah. So right after high school, and I want to also kind of bring in this note because I feel like it's important also for those of you who are watching. It's speaking into the non-traditional and also speaking into not taking no for an answer. So when I graduated high school, I was technically still an immigrant. I did not have legal documentation here.
Okay.
So when I go to Bakersfield College to enroll, they wanted to enroll me as a non-resident, which means that I would have to pay 3 times more than a resident would have to pay.
Right.
And when whoever the staff member is, I don't know what their title is now, but whoever it was that I spoke to, they're like, well, you're not, you don't have a social security number, you don't have citizenship, that you're going to have to be enrolled as a non-resident. And I thought, that's not okay, right? Because I'm like, I've lived here my whole life. I have I have all of my education. I have a high school degree that says I graduated from Stockdale High School, which is here in Bakersfield. So I didn't take no for an answer. And I actually remember asking to speak to a different person to get more information. Mind you, I'm 18, right? Or actually, no, I'm 17 because I graduated early.
Okay.
So I'm 17 and I'm remembering. And so now in hindsight, I'm thinking, I don't know that a lot of 17-year-olds are going to have kind of that, I don't know what you call it, curiosity.
Curiosity, or I would almost say courage.
Absolutely.
Courage enough to challenge authority.
Yes.
Because she basically is an authoritative figure. And she's
Absolutely.
like, no, dude, you got to go, you got to do this, or, right?
And she's telling me, she's like, there's no other way. Right. And I didn't take that no for an answer. And I think, again, in hindsight, I think that was God just always guiding me and helping me be that person. And so sure enough, I speak to somebody else and they're like, wait, so you have your high school degree? I said, yeah, I graduated from Stockdale High School. Well, do you have your, how long have you? And so they started asking questions, and in asking those questions, it came to the conclusion that I actually could register as a resident because I had a high school degree and most of my education had been here, and I had a way to prove that. Right. And so I was able to start and to finish Bakersfield College as a resident without having to pay 3 times as much. Because you can imagine at that time, being from a single parent home, I was working to pay Bakersfield College. I was working to pay California State University. I did not have the luxury to just go enroll and just give someone a check, right? And so it made a huge difference for me, I think, but it speaks to this idea that we have to be curious. Yeah. There's nothing wrong with saying, is there another option? Is there a different route? Is there something else available? Right?
No, 100%. And listen, I don't want you guys to allow it to go over your head like that. Could have changed the total path of your life. Absolutely. You know what I mean? Absolutely. If you had not challenged, if you had not continued to ask questions, if you had not continued to chase your dream that you wanted, that could have, who knows where Anna Banana would be right now.
Exactly.
You know what I mean? Like, so it is so important that you ask us. So I applaud you for doing that.
Thank you. Yeah.
Okay, so once you got past that point, then where
So I'm Bakersfield College for 2 years. I'm at California State University for another, I want to say 4 or 5.
Okay.
Finished my bachelor's. That's when I didn't want to do a master's because I thought if I can move forward and skip 2 or 3 years of a master's degree, why not? Right.
Yeah.
And so
to get to the point that you are, the goal that you wanted.
Yeah, the goal that I wanted. And so then after completing my bachelor's from CSUB, then I started to apply to doctorate programs, the Chicago School of Professional Psychology being one of them. And after doing so many additional requirements, they accepted me. And so that program was actually it was an accelerated program. So we did like 6 or 7 years worth of a degree within 4.
Okay.
Because I think at that time, my mom had always been very good about telling me, take advantage of the time that you have. Take advantage of the opportunities that you are given. Take advantage of every single opportunity that you have. Don't waste time.
Yes.
And I didn't. And so I actually finished my doctorate degree at the age of 27. I was done with my entire education by the time I was 27.
That's what's up.
And I know that that is not the norm.
No, it's
I
not
know
the
that
norm,
that's
but
not
it can,
typical.
it to a certain degree, it can be.
Absolutely.
It can become the norm.
Exactly.
By just challenging and really
and knowing what path to take.
Right.
Because I was asking the questions. I wasn't just, settling for the traditional route. Then there's nothing wrong with the traditional route. I want to also make sure and say that some people, I was just blessed enough that at that point I was young. I didn't have a family. I didn't have children. I didn't have, a lot of other things, but I wasn't the only one. I had other colleagues who are now licensed psychologists as well, colleagues who were right around my same age. And so it is a possibility. I wasn't the only one, but it was a matter of kind of looking at things from a different perspective and being willing to hear and listen to what other people's journeys, right?
Yeah.
And how they got to that place and asking the appropriate questions, right?
Yeah.
And I think it's been so helpful because now where I'm at professionally and supervising a lot of people who are on their journey of education, I get to speak and I get to say, hey, listen, there are other options.
There you go.
Right? And so I feel like, again, I get to be that conduit to other people to kind of at least expose that there are other options. Because I have heard like, oh, you don't have to get a master's to get it.
Yeah.
No, you don't.
Yeah.
Right.
And I mean, like, again, one of the things that stands out is that you had a goal and there were several paths to that goal.
Yep.
And who doesn't want to save money? Who doesn't want to save time? I mean, look, time to me is the most valuable thing that we have
Absolutely.
in this world.
Yes.
So why go through another 3 to 4 years if you don't have to?
Absolutely.
Okay, so I'm curious, when you were in those graduate classes, what did those classes look like in terms of like the demographic? You're a woman, you are a Mexican, right? Yep. So were there a bunch of Mexicans in the class? Or were you just kind of like one of a few?
It's interesting because I think one of the reasons why I chose and wanted to apply to the Chicago School of Professional Psychology is because I was looking for diversity. And that was one of the things that called out to me. And one of the requisites that I had to do to get in was I had to interview with a professor there. Okay. And he was, African American, but so when I was interviewing, one of the questions that I had for him was, what does the diversity look like for the school? And so I heard good things. And so then fast forward, I get accepted. I show up to my first class, my first graduate course, because you're crossing the education, the 4 years basically in a cohort. So you're kind of always with the same group of people for the most part. Every once in a while, you're taking classes with either the year above you or people who are coming in after you. Yeah. But for the most part, we were one pretty stable cohort moving forward. And I was really blessed in that I was not the only woman of color in my cohort. I actually, a lot of my colleagues were women of color. We were primarily women. There was only, I think, 2 or 3 men in the program, in the cohort, and they were Caucasian, but the rest of us were women, and we were women of color.
Knocking it out.
We're knocking it out.
Knocking it out.
And when I graduated, I remember one of them specifically, we're sitting in our robes, and I have, the big, whatever it's called, the coat, the heavy doctor coat, whatever. I'm sitting there, I'm waiting for our names to be called, and she looks at me, she says, so I was doing some research and I looked at it and she's like, do you realize that Hispanic, Spanish-speaking psychologists make up, at that time, less than 0.5% of the population?
Wow.
And I was like, whoa. It made such an impact that I still remember that. Yeah. And unfortunately, the numbers haven't really changed a lot. Yeah. I love that there's more women, that there's more women of color in our field, but the truth of the matter is it's not to where it needs to be. Yeah. Right. But I remember sitting there and being so thankful and grateful to God that I had been given the opportunities and I had been blessed to be part of that less than 0.5 across the nation of women who had a doctorate degree, who were Hispanic, Latina, and spoke Spanish.
Yeah. It's interesting. It's interesting. It's amazing. but it shouldn't be amazing.
Absolutely.
You know, to me, it shouldn't be amazing.
Yep, I agree.
It should be something that's, the norm. But we're moving forward.
Yes.
And that's the biggest thing in making progress. So,
Absolutely.
So that's awesome. Okay, so you're working for the county?
I do.
Okay.
I work for the county.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about Mind Care Psychological Services.
Yes.
Okay. Now, talk to me a little bit. Is that private practice? Okay, talk to me a little bit about your practice.
So I always knew I wanted to help people, obviously, as I said that before. Mm-hmm. And to be honest with you, I can't remember what age I was specifically, but I remember I was somewhere in late high school, early 20s. I actually had a dream that, I know at that time was God-given. And it was this dream of having an organization that allowed me to help people with mental health condition or diagnoses. Mm-hmm. But in my dream, the organization it was bigger than that. I was we were able to provide Christian counseling. We were able to provide, classes for women who were coming out of domestic violent relationships. Mm-hmm. It was a big organization. There was different parts. And at that time, I remember my pastor was part of it. I remember my pastor's wife was another part of it. I remember my mom, who at the time sold Mary Kay Cosmetics. Okay. She was a part of it. And it just was really interesting because it was what I see now in my private practice. And so to me, Mind Care Psych Services has been official for the last almost, I would say a year now. But in my mind and in my dreams, and I think in God's vision and dreams for me, it's been around for a while. Yeah. And it's a newborn and it's developing, and I want to grow it into what God had given me. I want to grow it, and I envision something much bigger than what I have now. But to answer your question, it is my private practice. I started it about a year ago. I felt that God was leading me in that direction. Yeah. He used my pastor now, my current pastor, to kind of motivate me and to remind me that seed was planted there. And so I decided, and I spoke to my husband about it, who has always supported me and from day one has known that this is kind of the dream for me, right? Yeah. And he was like, let's do it. It's like, okay, what do we need to do? And going to school, they don't teach you how to start a business. There you go.
That's where I'm going. I need to know. They need to know. Because you go to school and you're taught how to be an employee.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
And that's fine.
Right.
But for those who are interested in maybe in psychology, maybe private practice, what did that process look like for you to open and start your own private practice?
It started. I have to be completely honest. There's a lot of months where I was very hesitant and I was very overwhelmed. I want to also be true and talk about the reality of that a lot of the times following your dreams can be very overwhelming. Yes. And can be very difficult because there's a lot of fear. There's a lot of self-doubt. There's a lot of everything, right? Anxiety, just the thought process. I'm like, well, how am I supposed to do this? I have no idea. I don't even know where to start. Right. And so I don't want to negate and, not talk about that part, which can be very normal and very true because we're humans and we don't have all the tool sets that we need for everything that we want out of our lives. So for me, it started after kind of having moments of, I don't know, and just feeling really overwhelmed. I thought, okay, but if I just sit here with this, I'm not going to do anything. Right. And it's never going to happen. I'm not going to get to my goal of having my private practice, being able to be my own boss, having my own work hours, and being more, really at that time I wanted to be around more for my children. My children are young, and I wanted to be, the mom that goes to field trips with them. I want to be the mom that's there for picnics and lunches and all this other stuff. And I thought that this is what's going to get me to that. Nothing wrong with, the 8 to 5, but I had done that for more than 10 years now. Okay. So I was ready for something else. So I think after feeling all of the feelings, I thought, okay, I at least need to start asking around. And so again, me being curious and not afraid of asking questions, I started to just ask my colleagues who were already doing. And this is the other thing I learned is you don't have to reinvent the wheel. We got to work smarter, not harder.
There you go.
So I was like, okay, well, there's people that I know in the county, you know, that have a private practice. Let me start by emailing them and asking them questions. Hey,
Yeah.
do you mind meeting with me? You know, this is where I'm at. And again, I think I was really blessed to find that the people that were around me that had their private or have their private practices have always been very willing and open
Yeah.
to share their tips, their tricks. Don't do this, do this. You know, I didn't do that, but there's this other option.
Right.
And so it was like a lot of information was laid out for me.
Right.
And through prayer and, you know, asking God to help me discern like all of this information, I was able to kind of land on, there was somebody suggested going and taking this program that basically is business school for psychologists.
Okay.
So it's two therapists that saw the need, that there was a lot of us that wanted to start our own business but didn't know how to.
Right.
And so basically that's their business, that's their private practice, is
Okay.
they teach you how to start your private practice.
Okay.
And I was like, wow, this is really interesting.
Who is that by?
They're actually called Zinni-Me.
Okay.
Me is
Okay.
the organization. And again, it's two therapists. And I came across this by one of my colleagues at
Okay.
work who also has his private practice. And he, again, just was always till this day, is very, very kind and is always willing to help me because, you know, my business is barely starting. I have a year.
Right.
There's a lot of things I'm still learning. But through Zinni-Me, I was able to basically purchase the membership, and it was an investment, right?
Okay.
So I took it. I went home, talked to my husband about it. I said, "This is where we are. This is how much it's going to cost. What do you think?"
Yeah.
And he's like, "Well, if it helped this person, and you're looked at it, and you think it might be helpful, let's do it, right?" And so I did, and in the membership, you basically go through like 12 weeks worth of learning everything from what's an LLC versus S Corp versus, you know, nonprofits.
Got it.
How website development. But what I really enjoyed about this organization for me personally is that they don't necessarily start out with what I thought was going to be starting out, like, oh yeah, I have to start buying the furniture for my office, right?
Mm-hmm.
It was really more of having and almost creating a vision for your business.
Okay.
Right? And being very intentional about what are you going to bring to the table that is unique and genuine for you. That was a big part of the classes and the videos and all of the homework and the things that they would have you, like I remember one of them, she had us do this homework assignment where it was like, you wake up in the morning and you're in your business, it's where you want it to be. What does your day look like?
Okay.
And it was literally like, right. And then so I did the exercise, right? I'm writing it down and I look at my day and I look at my day now because they're like compare and contrast. And I thought, that doesn't look anything like it, right?
Yeah.
And so then it was like, okay, this is going to be your motivator. This is what we're working towards. This is your aspiration to get to that place. And so another exercise was, you know, ask people around you, what are some of the gifts and talents? What are some of the good things that they see about you?
Okay.
That would then reflect into your business. So there I am emailing my closest friends and family and colleagues, and they're telling me about these things that then helped me to create my website, right? So it was very intentional, and I liked that it wasn't just here's how to do a business or here's how to set up a business, but it was what are you bringing to the table that is different and original to who you are?
Yeah.
Because that's what's going to market you. That's what's going to make a difference. Right? That's what is going to attract people to your business, to who you are. And then slowly but surely, I got to the point where I needed to hire somebody to do website development and kind of like marketing, right? I needed a logo. I needed a name. I didn't even know what the name was going to be.
Right.
So, you know, reached out to my cousin who is in marketing, has a degree in marketing in Mexico, and he connected me with some people, an organization who works there. They're in Mexico, but they actually work a lot with some of the biggest companies like Google and Apple and Coca-Cola and all these things doing marketing.
Okay.
So I met with them, and when I met with them, it was, you know, what do you want out of this business? What are you looking for? What are some of the aspirations? So again, it was very intentional of not just creating any kind of website.
Yeah.
Not just creating any logo, not just creating any name, right? And so it was a process of here's some of the names we came up with. And then I was like, oh, I don't know I'm sharing with my husband, and I'm sharing with my family, my mom and my sister. What do you guys think about this? And, and slowly but surely, it just came together in fruition.
Yeah.
Next thing you know, I have a website, and I'm like, whoa, this is serious. Like,
right.
It's legit.
It's about to happen.
It's about to happen.
Right.
I'm like, it's happening, right? And all along, so there's that part of it, while at the same time I'm thinking, where am I going to get clients from, right? Learning about how do you get on insurance panels, learning about what's going to be my fee, right? There was a big portion of that time that I also had to talk to my really good friend. I'm really blessed. I'm telling you, I have 5 really close friendships that are all women, are all Latina, and they're all therapists.
Okay. All right.
So I know that I have something very special, and
your tribe sounds strong.
My tribe is very strong. Yeah. So I went to them. I said, why is it so hard for me to want to charge this amount of money for my service? Like, I feel like I'm doing a disservice to people. I feel like I'm, it was like survivor's guilt. Yeah. Right? It was like shame. And I needed my tribe to come through and say, look at who you are and what you bring to the table. Right. Your expertise, your education is valuable, right? And maybe some people are not going to be able to afford it, but the ones that are going to be genuinely, helped by your gifts and your talents. And so there was a part of me too in this journey that I had to really come to this consensus and self-reflection of understanding that I can't help everyone without it having a cost to me. Right. Does that make sense? No, and 100%. At the end of the day, this is a business, right? This is a business that I want to grow to eventually be able to offer free or, services and whatnot to the community. But for now, this is where I'm at. But there was different moments where I would have to come to my tribe.
Yeah, I mean, it's important, I think, too, because that feeling, I think, is not abnormal. But to not shortchange yourself, not shortchange your dream, right? And undervalue yourself and what you offer. Because I know, when you think about that number and you know that that's the number that it should be, but you're like, oh, wait, that number doesn't feel good saying it out loud, or whatever that may be. So it's important. I heard how you face the fear, and I personally believe that dreams and fears are connected. So whatever it is that you're dreaming about, if you're dreaming big enough, that there's got to be some fear, right? Got to be some fear there, or you're not dreaming big enough, right? And whatever that fear is, once you face that fear, you get a little closer to your dream. So now you've gone through the whole process, right? So and you were all scared. Oh, should I do it? I'm not sure. So now in hindsight, how do you feel like that fear was warranted? Or
I do.
Okay.
I feel like it was warranted. I feel like it was needed. I feel like I was dreaming big enough that it was normal. It was natural for me to have that fear. But I think what for me and what I try to teach my kids all the time is it's okay to fear. Let's do it with fear. Okay. Let's still do it with fear. I mean, and obviously for them, because they're so little right now, it's I'm here with you. I'm holding your hand. It's gonna be okay, right? Yeah. But I want them to understand that life is going to be fearful, right, and full of it to some degree. But we shouldn't let that hinder or stop us from moving forward with our dream. Right. And so now, in hindsight, I look at it, and it's been a year now, and I'm thinking like, wow, look how far I've come, right? Yeah. Yeah. And it's not just me. It's not just me by myself. There was a village, right? That there was a tribe that helped me, that supported me. There was a lot of people, that planted seeds, that planted moments of whether it was encouragement, whether it was I'm praying for you, I'm praying for this business, whether it was sure, let me tell you about this, let me answer your question, and then some, right? And so I know and I understand that it wasn't just me. There's a lot coming behind me, and I always want to remember that and honor that moving forward. And as my business continues to grow, I know for a fact that I'll continue to have a certain sense of fear. Yeah. Because I want it, what I envision and the dream that God gave me for this business is so much more than what I'm doing now. Yeah. And I know that, and I understand that, but I'm also not. I think one of the biggest lessons I've learned in the last couple of months about this process is that I was telling my husband this, it feels like somebody's holding me back.
Okay.
Like it feels a lot of the times when I'm hearing, you know, you could be doing this with the business. We could be doing this, right? I'm going to networking events and I'm learning about, you know, all of these other things. And I'm thinking like, man, I could totally do that. And I could do that. And I could do that. And I feel like I'm being like held back to some degree.
Right.
But realizing that anything that is worthwhile and that is going to be well thought out and well created takes time.
Yeah.
And I have to learn to be patient, because that is one of the things that I know that it's one of my weaknesses that I'm always working on.
Okay.
I'm very impatient because I want things done, right?
Yeah.
I want to, let's do this and then what? And then
Right,
what?
right.
And sometimes I think God in this process and this last year has taught me slow is okay, right? Taking one step at a time is okay. And I know that for where my personal goals are for both my professional job and my private practice, right now, slow is okay. And I'm wanting to learn to be okay with that. And so I want to encourage people who are listening that you may feel that same way of like, man, I could be doing this and this and this and this. And there's all these things that you could be doing.
Yeah.
But maybe God has you in a place where we're learning to just be slow and be present.
Pace it.
Pace yourself, right? Yeah. I think that that's my biggest lesson right now is pacing myself and realizing all of that will come.
Yeah.
There'll be a time for that. And to trust that those doors will be there when I get there. Because that's I think, again, my fear, one of my fears is that by the time I get to that place, those doors will be closed. That those opportunities won't be there. And the fact of the matter is that that's my fear talking. That's not true. Right?
Yeah. Fear will talk to you.
Yeah.
It will talk to you for sure. Now, I'm curious about any missteps, any fails, because, you know, one of the things that, you know, we talked about curiosity, we talked about fear, we talked about some triumphs, and, you know, I don't think that we can state the importance of sometimes falling on your face and failing. So have you ever experienced any fails, any embarrassing moments that you can share? Pick out one.
We could be here a whole nother hour talking about failure. I'll tell you that much.
What do you feel about failure? And if there's a short story you want to share?
You know, what I've learned from failure is that I can't have a win, or I can't get to a place of success without failure. And the sooner I accept that, the better it will be for me and for everybody else around me. And again, that's something that I'm trying to teach my kids, that failing is not a bad thing. Failing is okay. And actually failing is needed in order for you to get to where you need to be.
There you go.
I'll tell you one story, which is the biggest story, I think, in professionally speaking, when talk about this journey of, you know, being a doctor. So I was a doctor and I got my degree, but then there's this other part in our field that is required, which is getting your license.
Okay.
That was a very long journey for me. It was, I want to say, at least 5 years, if not longer.
Wow. And
it took me 7 failed attempts before I actually got my license.
7,
which to me that's a big number, because in comparison, again, because we tend to compare, right? And so I'm in this cohort, you know, my colleagues, people are passing, people are getting their license, they're passing these tests, and, you know, they're doing what they have to do. And here I am, it's been 5 years and six failed attempts, because I passed at my 7th. Okay. So 6 failed attempts. So that was a huge journey.
And you're paying for these tests.
$800
let's
every
make sure
time.
We don't. Yeah, let's not. I know. Let's make sure that we understand. This isn't just a test you just walk in and take. You're paying for that.
$800, right. $880 every time I would take the test.
So $880, 6 times failed. Yes. How are you feeling?
Devastated, defeated.
Yeah.
But it was one of those things, again, in hindsight, looking back now, that I learned so much from that time for myself, for my future generations, and what I instill in them, but also for the people that are now around me, because now as a licensed psychologist, I actually get to supervise interns, people who don't have a license yet. And I get to speak into their life, into their journey. Yeah. And so you don't see any of that in that moment where you're just failing after failure after failure. And mind you, this is So it's $800 every time I'm taking the test, but there's also study material, thousands of dollars worth of study material. I use like 4 different study companies.
Wow.
Because I'm not a naturally good test taker, right? Because I see a plethora of answers. So when I'm looking at, is it A, B, C, or D, I'm thinking like, well, it could be all of them, right? Because I'm looking at so my mind just doesn't work, I guess, traditionally.
That's a great point.
Yeah, it just doesn't work in that way. So it was really more about learning to be a good test taker. But in that process and that journey, it was also, I think, about working on, and I'm not, ashamed to say this, but it was also working on my ego.
Okay.
It was also working on this idea of like, man, you're a Latina, Spanish speaking, you have a doctorate degree, like, whoa, right? And I think that what didn't help is that I was the first person in my entire family to have a doctorate degree. I was the first person, to have this type of job, and people, at church, like, oh, Dr. Anna Mena. And so it was really easy to get a really big head.
Yeah.
And it was a journey. It was not just for my licensing, but it was a spiritual journey, because I remember I was crying out to my spiritual mentor. I love her so much because she guided that time of my life. So she was just amazing. She really was my lifesaver. But I remember I told her and I asked her, why doesn't God allow me to pass? Mm-hmm. I want to do all of these things with a license. Yeah. And I'm still sitting here. It's been how many years? And I just like, why doesn't he allow me to pass? Like, I want, I'm just like this kid who's crying and who's like having a fit because I'm like, I want him to let me pass. And I remember Ivy looked at me, she asked me something and she said, what do you think God is more worried about? You passing your licensing test or your soul? And I was like, whoa. Yeah. That was the turning point. Yeah. Because I realized that this was not about a licensing exam. It was not about this test. Yeah. It was about me, and realizing that I was not going to be able to do or function or be the person that he needed me to be if he allowed me to get this license. If I just passed and I just got my license and went on. So it was trivial. It was that moment where I felt like I had landed on my face, and I was like, I'm so sorry. And it changed everything, because then it wasn't about me. It was, realizing who I am and realizing that I'm not that big of a deal. I'm not the big shot I think I am. And that big head is really hard to get through a lot of doors. Right? And so I think that it was that journey for me, and realizing like, you need to,
tone it down
a little bit, right? Because if you're going to do what I want you to do, that's going to get in the way really quickly. And so it was after that, and after some very intense studying with a tutor, because that was the other thing too. My ego was like, I don't need a tutor. I know how to study. I've been doing it forever, right? Like, I finished this degree. I have a doctorate. Like, I obviously got through school. Like, I don't need a tutor. And so it was kind of like also that, like, just hire a tutor, right? Yeah. And so I did, and I worked with him for 3 months, and I passed. 7th time, I passed.
You can never underestimate. A lot of times in our cultures, we're taught that we've got to do it by ourselves.
Yes.
And we allow the world to trick us into believing that we're not as good, we're not what we actually are, which is great.
Right.
So if we get help from someone, and if you think about any of the brightest stars, none of them have done it by themselves.
Absolutely.
None of them have done it by themselves. So that's a really crucial point right there. But also something you said about the fact that you weren't a good test taker and your mind didn't work a certain way. There's a lot of people that, I'm not smart enough. I'm not good enough. She must be a genius to do what she's done.
No. No.
So I think that there's, the resilience piece of it. There is, I'm not going to be stopped. There is, I'm going to fall, but I'm also going to learn from those falls.
Absolutely.
I'm going to bring people in, and we talk, I hear mentors have been there for you in a big way. So I think it's so important that we not lose sight of all those things. We can't do it by ourselves. If you stick to it, that you can get through it. and just never give up.
And never give up.
Never
and
give up.
And always trying to honor those who have helped you to get to where you are.
Yeah.
I remember when we did, when I was going to get my office for my private practice, I was telling my sister and my mom, and like, yeah, like, you know, come see the new office, and I have an office now, and it's like official, right? And my sister, being, you know, the amazing sister she is, she's like, well, let's do a ribbon cutting ceremony.
Okay.
And I'm like, what? Like, why would I, like, I'm not opening up like a building, right? Because in my mind, ribbon cutting, you always see like, you know, on TV or social media, it's like, you know, a new business,
right.
and it's like whole building and this,
Right,
that, and the other. And she being, you know, so wise and always my biggest cheerleader, she's like, so it doesn't matter. You are creating generational wealth. You're breaking stereotypes. You are creating a life, and you're fulfilling a dream that very few people in our family and in our culture have the opportunity to do. And I was like, wow, like, okay.
You didn't think of it that way.
I didn't think of it that way.
Yeah.
And so then I was sharing, and I was talking to another colleague of mine who, you know, went to school with me, Dr. Deo, and she also a woman of color, minority, and just had very similar upbringings, right? Yeah. And she knows my story. She knows my husband because she, you know, she's known us for a long time. When I was when I started grad school, we were dating, and I actually got married in the middle of grad school.
Okay.
So she has known and has gotten to know my husband, who is also a first generation immigrant. English was not his first language. He actually did not finish formally his education in his country of origin, but now, you know, has a master's degree from Fuller Theological Seminary as a chaplain, and does amazing work. And so anyway, she kind of understanding where we both were coming from. She's like, that is amazing. That's a beautiful idea, because you get to show your children this process.
Yes.
And they get to be a part of your journey in a way that very other few children would have that opportunity.
Yeah.
So it's not just, because I was thinking like, oh, I don't want to make a big deal about it.
Yeah.
To me, it's not a big deal. Like, I'm just happy that I've gotten to this place. And she's like, it's not about being a big deal. It's about the symbolism that this has for your family.
Yeah.
Right. And so we did a ribbon cutting ceremony, and it was just from the door. The ribbon was just the door. But I cut it, and I have the pictures, and I have the video.
That's awesome.
My grandmother, who was, you know, 84 at the time, came with my mom, and she gifted me something, prayed over me.
Yeah.
It was just this beautiful moment that I have, again, thanks to, you know, my sister and the way that she thinks, and my friends and the support of my family. And that picture always sits on my desk in my private practice. And it's me and my husband with my 2 kids as I'm cutting this ribbon.
Monumental is the word that comes to mind. It's just monumental. I mean, on so many different levels, because you went through a lot,
right,
for sure. But then when you bring your family into it and your kids, you know, it is monumental. And I think it's really important for us to celebrate ourselves, right, and not be afraid to do that.
Yes.
And not feel like I'm I don't know, I'm being stuck up or whatever it may be.
Right.
But celebrating the accomplishment, whether it's something small or something big. So to me, that's monumental.
Yeah, I think I'm learning that as well. Is I went from almost kind of like the spectrum of like having too much of a big head to then having somewhat of a not feeling like I'm worthy of this stuff, to kind of being in the middle and learning and realizing that just because I want to be humble and I want to be true to who I am in God doesn't necessarily mean that I also don't get to celebrate His blessings
there you go.
over myself and my family. And to have, you know, again, my grandmother who was there, who was an immigrant, barely knows how to read or write, migrated to this country to work and to offer better opportunities for her children, my mom and myself included. That was huge for me. Yeah. Right? It's literally the epitome of the American dream.
Yeah.
I saw a version of that when I graduated, and she was there also, right? And getting my doctorate degree. But then now moving forward, now having my own business, right? Starting my own private practice. Again, there's so much beauty in that, more so than just, yay, the celebration.
Yeah,
this, that, and
it's
the
bigger.
other.
It's honestly, it's bigger than you.
Yeah.
It's bigger than you.
It's bigger than me.
It's bigger than
and it's
you.
a way to honor everybody else that has come behind me.
No, 100%.
Who has paved the way for me to get to this point.
Yeah, listen, I gotta hit this button. You can't hear it, but it's just like, it's just fire. It really means enough. Listen, and you talk about blessing. I want you guys to bless someone right now, right? I want you to bless someone, not necessarily for you, but I want you to hit the like button and share this with someone that you believe can benefit, because it's not necessarily always about us. It's about somebody else. So hit the like button and share. And with someone that you believe can benefit. So I want to switch gears real quick.
Yeah.
You're a speaker.
Yeah.
All right. So I was able to find. I think I don't know when it was, but you spoke at a women's conference, and I am officially the second best Spanish speaker in this household now, because my 5-year-old daughter.
Is now better than you?
Oh, 100%.
Love it.
100%. And she's
amazing.
5.
I love it.
So talk to us about, you as a speaker and who you speak to and what that looks like.
I think it's just, I've always had this natural tendency to, I like speaking. I like, I'm not afraid to stand up in front of a crowd and talk about something that's passionate to me, or talk about, my God and everything that he is able and capable to do. And so for me, the private practice my business was also my ability to kind of mix those two things together. Okay. Right. And so part of my private practice is not just seeing clients for therapy, but it's also providing conferences, providing, workshops, providing trainings for any entity, agency that I think could, benefit from what I have to share. Yeah. And so because I had always been, I remember I started preaching at my church when I was like 16 or 17 years old. And, my young adult life was very ingrained in the church. I would go to missionary trips. I was a leader for the youth group, right? Yeah. So it was just kind of God's way of preparing me for what was to come. And so now part of what I also do is I put myself out there for people churches, organizations, anyone who's really willing to hear, whether it be my story or to get a training, a workshop or something, right? Mm-hmm. And so last year I spoke at a women's conference in San Francisco for my church organization. And it's so beautiful. I love speaking.
It feels good, right?
It feels good. It feels really good. And then afterwards you're like so exhausted and you're so tired, but it still feels good. Right. And so now any opportunity that I have, if I can be of a blessing of service to any organization or any church or anything like that, I am always happy to help and happy to speak. And so when you go on my website, I have a number of like training topics. I have a number of like workshop information. But it has really been a huge blessing for me to connect both my faith and my degree, and to bring that to the table. I was actually just speaking to a group of women this weekend in San Francisco as well. And, we're learning about, I spoke on the role of a woman within the Christian home. Okay. And, to see what God is doing through me for these women is really, really humbling, but it's also such a blessing. And, from that opportunity, I met a couple of people and they talked about having me speak at, their next event. And then I'm also speaking at the same women's conference again this year in June. Nice. So it just, I'm just letting God do what he can do. Yeah.
Do what he does, right?
Do what he does.
Do what he does.
And I'm just showing up and asking him to use me in any way he can.
Okay, awesome. And just for speakers out there, and you're a speaker, how do you have any advice for them in terms of, how you are, getting these opportunities to speak?
So definitely don't be afraid to put yourself out there. One of the things I learned early on, and I think this was more from when I would preach at church, is that, you might have a crowd of 5 or you might have a crowd of 5,000. There you go. It doesn't matter. The way that you prepare, the way that whatever you bring to the table should be the same no matter what. And also, I'm always learning and always looking to better myself as best as I can. So I want to be a sharp knife. So I'm always looking for ways on, how do I become a better public speaker? Is there, classes or courses or things or books that I need to read to better myself that will then bring, and I'll see that result within my speaking opportunities. So I think my suggestion is always to prepare yourself and speak to as if you were speaking to, a large crowd, no matter what, but also, make sure you're always preparing yourself and learning more about your trade, right? If you want to be a public speaker, then we're wanting to make sure we're learning more about that specifically, and how can I better myself? How can I strengthen my strengths, but then also work on my weaknesses?
There you go.
Yeah.
Pour it all out. Pour it all out.
Pouring it all out.
I don't want to play. We're gonna get ready to wrap it up, but I want to play a quick game with you called Imagine If.
Imagine if. Woo.
Imagine if.
Okay.
Imagine if you could go back in time to visit your younger self at the beginning of your journey. What advice or words of wisdom would you share with her, knowing what you know now?
Man, that's a really good question. It's going to be okay. You're stronger than you think.
Okay.
And don't take no for an answer.
Okay. There you go.
Yeah.
All right. Imagine if every person on earth could hear just one message from you, what would that message be, and what impact do you hope it would have?
I think the message would be seek the Lord in everything that you do, and everything else will be okay.
There you go. Beautiful. Short and sweet.
Yeah.
Okay. Last one. Imagine if you could attend a dinner party with any 3 to 5 historical figures.
Ooh.
Whoever historical is to you.
Okay.
All right. Living, deceased. Who would you invite? 3 to 5. And what would you be most excited to talk about? What do you feel like the vibe is at that dinner? 3 to 5.
It's so hard because they're so different. So Jesus for sure.
Okay. All right.
Jesus for sure. He'd be like my number one.
There you go.
My maternal grandfather, who I never got to meet, but I hear so many stories of who he was, and I'm so curious to hear her story, his journey.
Yeah.
So my maternal grandfather.
Okay.
Gosh, I'm trying to think of who else, because so far I'm like, those are the only two.
Well, it's your dinner, so you can invite whoever you want.
Right, it is my dinner, right? And I'm imagining here. So, and then I think I would probably, I probably would want to also, I'm thinking of, I've always been very interested and curious about like Sigmund Freud.
Okay.
Because obviously he's a father of our profession to some degree.
Yeah.
Carl Rogers is another big person in the mental health field. So I'd want to have dinner with them and kind of see where that would, ask more questions as to how all of this came about, right? Rogerian type of therapy. So that's 4?
So Carl Rogers,
Sigmund Freud,
Abuelo,
my abuelo, and of course Jesus.
Yeah. Are we inviting anyone else?
I'm trying to think who else.
You don't have to.
I don't have to. Yeah, I don't know.
And what are you guys talking about? What's that?
I mean, obviously, I'm asking all my existential crisis questions to
Right.
Jesus, right? Like, listen, what about this, and this?
Right,
How do I get right?
Notepad and everything.
Exactly, absolutely. Right. I'm like, what do you mean when you said this? Like, really, right? To my abuelo, I'm asking, what was his life like? What was it like to be the father of my aunts and uncles?
Yeah.
And was he happy, right? So it's more of like the personal, like familiar family type of questions. And with Sigmund Freud, Carl Rogers, it's more related to my field.
Yeah.
How did you see things from this perspective? I would want to tell them what psychology looks like in 2024. And so I would want to share that with them and say, what do you think?
Yeah,
and get their input about it and whatnot.
Do you think they'd be happy with the state of affairs?
I don't know. I think so. I think in general, I think they would. I think that we're such a big profession now. We're such a big part of who people are and how to help people.
Yeah.
And I think that ultimately at the core, that's what they were looking to do and seeking to do. And so I think we have come a long way from that, and we have so much more research and advancement that allow us to look at at any individual in a more holistic manner, and to really understand how our mind, how our psyche affects the rest of our body, but also our generations, our environment, our communities, right? So I think they would be pleasantly, surprised.
Nice.
Yeah.
Nice. No, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. So I said I was going to come back to this. So self-reflection.
Yeah.
How important is that when it comes to, in your opinion, when it comes to someone attempting to design their lives?
It's huge. It's paramount. It has to be foundational as to your process, because I think otherwise we're making a bunch of decisions that may or may not be intended or fruitful for you based on your dream. And so I think and that's one of the hardest things I think, and I find with the newer generations now, is to have true self-reflection. Because I think we have a lot of this talk of meditation and spending time with yourself and self-care, and all these things are great and I love them and everything, but true self-reflection really, to me, is courageous. Because when you're having to sit down with yourself and reflect on the good, the bad, and the ugly, you have to be really courageous to be able to do what you need to do to change the good, the bad, and the ugly, or to work on the good, the bad, and the ugly. And I think that's one of the reasons why a lot of people are scared and are fearful of therapy, because to me, people who go to therapy and actually stick with it are some of the most courageous, strongest people in the world. Because again, it is, and it has a lot of that self-reflection. But it's not just reflecting on yourself, but it's, what are you going to do about it? Right?
What action are you going to take?
What action are you going to take that comes out of that self-reflection? So if you're in that moment and you're realizing that your patterns of thinking are primarily negative, what are you going to do about that? Are you going to continue to think that way? Or are we going to do something different? Are we going to change, right? And you may be able to have the power to change and do it on your own, or you may need to go get help. And again, people who ask for help, to me, are some of the strongest people in the world as well.
That's awesome.
Because you're not going to do everything on your own. I can't pretend and sit here and say that I've done it all on my own. There's no way. There's no way. So for me, self-reflection is foundational. It has to be part of this process. Otherwise, you might always feel like you're working towards your dream, but you're not actually getting there, because you're also not implementing the changes that are needed to get to that place.
There you go.
Does that make sense?
No, 100%. 100%. You got to look within. You got to
Always.
be honest. Got to look within. You got to be honest with yourself, and you got to face the fear and the uncomfortable feeling the uncomfortable feeling of change.
Yes.
And that's really a lot of times where, we want to stay in a space where we feel comfortable. In the morning, I get up, I'm crazy. I get up at 3:00 in the morning.
Oh my goodness, you are crazy.
Yeah, pretty much every day. And it's so comfortable and warm at 3:00, and I'm going through my head every single morning, I don't want to get out of bed. But I know if I don't get out of bed, it's not going to get done. So I've got to get out. I got to get into that uncomfortable space. And as you get into that uncomfortable space more often, more frequently, it becomes more comfortable. And, I don't know that it'll totally be, I don't know that I'll totally just jump out of bed at 3 a.m.
3 a.m. every day?
Yeah. But you've got to get into that uncomfortable space. And I think that within that self-reflection space is where you start to realize those things and start to transform a little bit.
Absolutely. I agree. Yeah, it has to happen there. Otherwise, again, you just always feel like you're working towards something but never really attaining it. And that's also really frustrating. Yeah.
Okay, so why is because you've designed your life. You've clearly crafted the life that you feel most comfortable with and around your passions and dreams.
I think I've designed and crafted my life that I feel God is leading me to design and craft.
Okay.
I don't think it's just me. I always believe that He is the one that is designing it. I just get to be a part of it. I get to partner with Him in it.
There you go.
But yes, I have, but because I'm always looking and seeking that connection.
And why is that connection, and why is that important to you?
Because to me, it's foundational. Because again, otherwise I end up doing and going places that I wasn't supposed to be in or do.
Yeah.
Right. And to me, that feels like a waste of time,
Yeah.
a waste of my energy, a waste of my gift and my talents.
Yeah.
And ultimately for me, I'm not serving who I need to serve because I'm over here being distracted by things that I wasn't supposed to be in anyway.
Yeah.
Had I listened, heard for, or followed the directive I was being given.
Yeah.
So to me, that's why is so important, because I feel like I've had moments in my life where I wasn't paying attention. I wasn't listening to what God wanted or what he was telling me to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then I ended up living through experiences that I shouldn't have lived through, or I shouldn't have been a part of, unfortunately. But in his grace and lovingness and mercy, you know, as the Bible says, he takes all the bad and turns it into good.
Mm-hmm.
And so even then, he still figured it out and helped me and whatnot. But I'm like, had I just listened, maybe I wouldn't have gone through that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And I see it as, you know, as parents, we kind of see it the same way with our kids. You know, we're telling them like, don't go down there, don't do this, because we know what's going to happen, right? But sometimes it still happens, but we still love them and we're there to lift them up and, you know, pick them up. But for me, that's why it's foundational. I want to be a part of a life that is designed for me. Because here's the other thing too is, to some degree, it takes off a lot of the weight of feeling like I'm all in this by myself.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
So if I'm following and I'm doing what he wants me to do, I'm okay with that because everything else will be taken care of. Does that make sense?
Yeah, yeah.
There's less of that pressure of like, oh my goodness, if I go down that, like, what if this happens? What if that happens? What if, and I've seen and I've tested, right? Or I've been obedient enough that I know to my core that even if he's asking me to do something that is weird, awkward, strange, doesn't feel good, right? That he still has my best outcome in mind, and that there's a reason why I'm having to go down that route. Like I said, my biggest example, like I mentioned before, is the licensing process. Yeah. Having to fail 6 times. There was a reason why that was happening. There was a reason why I had to be on that journey in that moment at that time.
It's a part of, to me, I almost equate it to, is a part of your becoming.
Exactly.
You know, becoming the person that you need to be for whoever it is that you're going to be serving.
Absolutely.
So, you know, I feel like it was just a part of that process.
It's a part of that process, and I had to trust that, you know, it was a part of that process, and I had to trust that he knew what he was doing more so than I do, or than I did at that time. Yeah. And sure enough, here I am.
There you go.
And he was right. So every other time, even when it's hard, starting the business, I was like, oh my gosh, I don't know, you know, that fear. Yeah. But I was like, okay, I trust you. And so I am, it lifts that weight that I think a lot of people I have seen and I have come to know that have that weight to do things on their own. And I'm thinking like, man, that's a lot of weight to carry. Yeah. Well, it feels like to me like you're living and working within your gifts. Yeah. You know, and I said at the beginning, you know, heart to give, and it just feels like that's who you naturally are, that you want to give, that you want to help. And so much so that you don't even realize that you should be helping yourself by doing the ribbon cutting. Exactly. Right? Yes. So, but you're living in your natural space and your natural element, and to me, that is designing your life. Yeah. So I do have a couple more questions. Yeah. There's a young person out there that's at the beginning of their journey, you know, and they feel like they have a dream. They feel like there's something that they have that they love. They're not necessarily sure how to kind of go about it, but they have this dream of something that they want to do, but they don't get any support. They don't have any support from the people that love them the most. Yeah. But this is the thing that they love. What do you tell that person? Look for your support system. Look for your tribe. You might not have it intrinsically or naturally, but it's worthwhile to look for that support system in some way, in some fashion. Yeah. Again, whether that's you having to maybe come out of your comfort zone and have to seek out that help through mentorship, through therapy, through friendships, through networking, through just putting yourself out there a little bit more or more than we're comfortable with, right? Yeah. But I think that it's very unfortunate that they don't have that natural support system. But I also feel my question would be, what are we going to do about it? Right. What are we going to do about it?
Now what?
Because we live in a day and age when there's so many resources available to our fingertips, literally on your phone, on a computer. what are we going to do about it? Right? How can we put ourselves out there? How can we ask? Who can we talk to? That we can try to get that support system. And it's one step at a time, right? Mm-hmm. It's one brick on top of one brick on top of one brick on top of one brick.
Right.
So that would be my my question, but also my suggestion is, let's look for it.
Yeah.
Might not be there, but let's look for it.
Awesome. Any new projects that you have going on that you're excited about that you want to share?
Nothing new necessarily. I think just again giving myself to the practice to public speaking. Mm-hmm. I don't know if I should say this here, I guess, but God's been putting on my heart to write a book.
Okay, breaking news.
I don't know how long it's going to be, though. So that's what I'm saying. I don't know if I should say it, but I feel like if I at least say it, I'm holding myself accountable, right? Yeah. To some degree. But it's been one of those things where it's coming up in the forefront of my mind. Yeah. And I've actually had a couple of people who have told me, I see, God puts in my heart and I see a book. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, whoa, that's interesting. Yeah. Right?
Yeah.
But I don't know when that's going to happen, honestly.
Listen, I truly believe that, our dreams come to us for a reason.
Yeah.
Those thoughts come to you for a reason. He placed that on your heart and your mind for a reason. And, it's, in my opinion, it's your responsibility. It's your responsibility to speak to it and bring that dream to life. I mean, it's, someone once, I think it was Les Brown, said that the most valuable place on earth is the grave because people take their best stuff with them when they leave this place.
I don't want to do that.
No, please don't do that. And so if it takes a year, 2 years, 10 years, I believe, and I can't wait for it to happen.
Thank you.
Please let us know.
Maybe I'll be back by then with the book.
Yeah, maybe.
To share the book, yeah?
We definitely can do a part 2 for sure.
Yeah.
Listen, this has been a wonderful, wonderful time. I've got one last question.
Yeah.
And I want to know, for me, and maybe we can give you some time to think about this if you need to.
Okay.
I believe that people who have designed their lives interact with no other people who have crafted their lives around their dreams and desires. So I want you to think about one person that you believe has designed a beautiful life for themselves in some shape, form, or fashion. And but before you give me that name, if you can give me that name now, it needs to be someone, or hopefully can be someone, that you would feel comfortable with trying to get them to come on the show with us.
Oh, that's a good question. Oh, man, there's so many. I feel like there's so many people.
That's a good thing.
Yeah.
That's a good thing.
Yeah. I feel like there's so many people. Man. That's a hard question.
Okay. No, we can come back to it, but I want you to think about that because, again, the idea around this whole conversation and this podcast is to bring to life and make it normal.
Yeah,
to a certain degree. I mean, a lot of times we set our bar at, superstar athlete, entertainer, musician, the 1%. And there's nothing wrong with the 1%. But there are hundreds, thousands of people that have designed beautiful lives. And it makes it so much more attainable.
Absolutely.
When you can see it, feel it, and hear it from someone who's done it. So hopefully you can give me a name.
I can't. I'll think about it.
Name later.
Yes, absolutely.
How can people get in contact with you?
Well, they can call me. They can go to my website. They can send me an email.
What's your website?
So it's dranamena.com. So DRANAMENA.com. Okay. And then if they want to get a hold of me via phone, they can call me 661-345-9515. And actually, you know what? I might have to double check on that.
Okay. No, that's fine.
Just because I'm bad with when it comes to phone numbers. But yeah, okay. Dr. Anna Mena, or they can always email me as well. Dr. Anna Mena. I'm sorry. Mindcare at dranamena.com. If that makes sense. Yeah.
No, got it.
Mindcare at dranamena.com. And then just to confirm, it's 241-3515.
There you go. And that's, what's that area code?
661. Sorry,
661.
661.
This is going out to somebody who might be calling you from New York or
Love
Europe
it.
or
Love
wherever.
It. 661-241-3515.
Awesome,
There we
awesome.
go.
Anna, Dr. Anna.
Stop it. Anna.
Anna, thank you so much. This
Thank
has been
you
a
for
wonderful
having me,
conversation.
Obed. Oh, love
this has been awesome. And again, the main thing for me is just allowing people to see that it can be done.
Yeah.
And for you out there, again, believe in the possibilities of who you can be, what you can do, what you can accomplish. And I truly believe that what other people think about you and believe that you can accomplish is none of your business. It's none of your business. It's your business to believe that you can get it done. If a human being can do it, you can do it too.
That's right.
So believe that you're a champion. Never forget it, right? Keep taking those steps forward and believe that you're a champion. All right. We'll see you next week. This has been another exciting episode. Thank you so much, Anna, and we'll see you next week. Peace.
You gotta dream it, like you mean it. Embrace the vision, no need to conceal it. Feeling the masterpiece, the colors so bright. Aim for the stars, reach new heights. Align your life, don't let it design you. Chase your dreams, make them all come true. Dance to the rhythm, move with the beat. You're the creator, get up on your feet. Then you gotta dream it, like you mean it. Embrace the vision, no need to conceal it. Vision masterpiece, the colors so bright. Aim for the stars, reach new heights. Design your life, don't let it design you. Chase your dreams, make them all come true. Dance to the rhythm, move with the beat. You're the creator, get up on your feet.